This is the business section or business pages in the daily Boris graph. Today, Monday, the 4th of January 2021. Now, the main headline is MPs warn Sunak, the UK finance minister, about northern spending, northern meaning the northern part of England. And it says that influential Tory group led by Jack Berry urge support for levelling up in regions at risk of being left behind. Now, this is something that we have said has been going on for centuries. So it's not some kind of news that regions are being left behind. Regions that are in the north, the northeast, northwest, and even in the middle of England. They're talking about the regions within England. They're not talking about Wales, Cornwall, Northern Ireland, Scotland. Against Scotland, they have been virulently, vociferously, and contemptuous. The headlines being that Scotland will not have a referendum for a few more decades. That is the contempt with which the Johnson-fronted cabal treats Scotland. And the fact that that is the ruling line taken by the Fleet Street papers shows that there is a morass, there is a lack of movement, there is a lack of recognition of the truth. And this is why regions at risk of being left behind will stay left behind so long as the decision makers impose, as fronted by Boris Johnson in the name of the government of the United Kingdom, will continue to fail, will continue to refuse to recognize the rights of the people being left behind. And the fact that Keir Starmer is silent on this and has been silent on this attitude by the Boris Johnson-fronted cabal shows that despite the fact that Starmer is supposed to be leading the Labour Party MPs in Parliament are currently in Parliament, and the Labour Party members of the House of Peers, and generally the Labour Party membership, they are as negligent and disrespectful of the regions as the Conservatives and the Boris Johnson-fronted parts of the Conservatives are. There has been an internet piece by Owen Jones, who is described as a columnist on The Guardian, or the Guardian columnist. An interview with a person about Wales, and whether the question that Owen Jones asked was whether that person thought that Wales should become independent, or when that person thought Wales would become independent. of England or independent of the UK. And the person replied that they hadn't been in support of the cause for independence of Wales. But over the years, this person has come to the conclusion that Wales should become independent. And this person, in making the statement, referred to the fact that Wales was made a part of the United Kingdom, part of England, or the Federation of England, and other states like or other nations, including Scotland, Northern Ireland, and so forth. This person said that Wales was included as part of the empire, imperialist policies to help not become a part of the British Empire, but to help perpetuate British Empire. And in one analogy this individual gave, immediately after that statement about Wales's history in being joined with England as part of the need for imperial kind of perpetration, he failed to refer to Africa or Asia, where all the imperialist locations and countries and occupations were based and located. Now that is the kind of bankruptcy, moral bankruptcy, and intellectual stupidity on the part of even those who claim to understand and accept the need for independence of Wales, or in the context, independence for Scotland. And this is the problem that Fleet Street media doesn't understand. That empire is gone, and the experience of the Welsh people and the Scottish people as part of the United Kingdom, the experience has been made worse, increasingly worse, by the attitude of the ones who control the decision-making, quote, options and constitutional, conventional powers in the name of the UK. That they are incapable of understanding the needs of the Welsh, the needs of the Scots, and the needs of the Cornwallish people and the people of Northern Ireland. This unfitness and inability to understand is evidence that whatever had existed during the various centuries of, factually it must be called English empires, has gone, to the point that today in the papers, in Fleet Street papers, they are continuing to publish 6 or 7 different contradictory positions as the way forward out of the pandemic. They're intellectually incapable of seeing these contradictions. And this inability is made worse by the fact that in the population which is, let's say, indigenous white population, there isn't any movement for resetting the governing kind of cliques and cabals in order to fit the needs of the United Kingdom. In fact, not even the needs of the English nation, as the item in the Boris Graph business section about the North illustrates and confirms. Anyone who is not resident in the UK and has not visited the UK, but viewing this particular diagnosis of Fleet Street, may wonder why we are saying what we are saying, but this is not being said by the others, the so-called mainstream media, that those people watching this have either access to or have access to translations of. And the truth is that this is absolutely correct. Nobody else is saying this because they are part of the same attitude of denial, being in denial of the truth. And we have been chronicling on a daily basis the failures and the unfitness of the MPs and the parliament and of the government, so-called, every day. And that is not just confined to the failures and the negligence and incompetence and the unfitness of the government at the center of the United Kingdom, which is situated and sited in London. It is also rampant in the locally set up local government units, local government bureaucracies in the local borough councils. And in the case of London, the so-called regional London, Greater London Assembly, it's the same thing. And when you look at the behavior and the conduct of the judicial bureaucracy, that is the courts, the same unfitness, the same negligence, the same contradictions come to the surface. Because in the legal system, so-called, which we call the legal bureaucracy, there is no consistency. There is nothing that can be relied on or trusted or believed. And it then includes that the same absence of reliability and trust in the judicial bureaucracy also dominates the agencies of the state, various agencies of the state for various specific purposes are failing. And at the center of all of that, in terms of the administrative kind of collapse and disintegration, is the absence of any auditing, any holding to account, any of those agencies, outfits, boroughs, assemblies. And this is a fact that is known to those who write, who edit, and who commission the contents of the Fleet Street papers. But they are not telling the readers any of that. They're not sharing with the readers any of that. And that is part of the denial, being in denial by the papers. So anyone who looks at the paper, so-called, on the news channels of Sky News or the BBC, or the factual program, so-called, on the ITV news, anyone looks at the newspapers of the day, and there are slots where so-called journalists are given spots of about pairs of journalists, 2 at a time, given spots to preview or review the Fleet Street papers every day. And they don't. These reviewers, on the whole, essentially behave as parrots. They don't give factual, truthful, analytical, diagnostic comments or commentary on the contents and the role of the Fleet Street newspapers. They deliver scripted kind of views and points of views and faked exchanges, disagreements on minor issues between the two guests appearing sometimes. So there are about 50 or 60 altogether, mainly Fleet Street based quote journalists that are given several stints, spots during every year to appear as newspaper reviewers or previewers on BBC News Channel, on Sky News, and in the case of the ITV, in the breakfast program called Good Morning Britain currently. And these guests don't rock the boat. They don't say the truth. They play along and they never reveal even 1% of the truth that they know about the dysfunction and unfitness of the government, the dishonesty of the government ministers, the corruption of the government ministers and the government departments and the agencies or the local councils. They hardly ever even mention the local councils in this context. They never mention the local councils as being part of the problem. They never mention the judicial bureaucracy as being part of the problem. They never mention the state of no auditing as being part of the problem. They never mention the actual role of the members of parliament who are the elected parts of the parliament. The other house, the House of Peers, is not, of course, elected. So therefore, they are not really the main parliament. The main parliament is the elected one, which is the House of Commons. In other words, called the lower house. So we have an emptiness, a deep, deep, deep emptiness across Britain about everything, and exhibited in the behavior of every organ of the state and every kind of component of what should be factually called democracy. But democracy is not working. So it's a dumb-mocracy, because every element that should speak out and hold to account the failing, unfit government and the unfit parliament is silent, dumb.